I wanted to mention this Netflix docuseries called Pepsi Where's My Jet, which I guess is a play on Dude, Where's My Car as a title.
Probably.
But I found it interesting. Actually, somebody texted me saying that I should watch it because it's a case that's taught in first year contracts law school. And I did learn about it. And it's really not that interesting of a case, really. I think just like the facts behind it are funny and fascinating. I think it's kind of used as an introduction to the law of contracts because there isn't a whole lot of useful law there behind it. I mean, there's some stuff that we can get into, but it's just a fun case in terms of what happened. And it made for a fun docuseries about this guy who saw this commercial that Pepsi aired saying that you could redeem Pepsi points for prizes and you got them from the bottle caps. So it was a way to get people to buy more Pepsi. They were competing with Coke, of course. The commercial was showing this kid, and really, part of the argument of the case became that it was marketed towards children because it showed a kid going to high school and he had all this like Pepsi gear on, like the Pepsi hat and the jacket, and you can get all these different Pepsi items with the points. But at the end, it showed a kid landing a fighter jet in his schoolyard, like the front yard of his school, saying that sure beats the bus, and it said 7 million points on the screen. 7 million Pepsi points gets you this fighter jet. Now, there was no disclaimer or anything like that. There's no legal language saying, haha, just kidding, it doesn't apply. But obviously, Pepsi said that it was intended to be a joke. But there was a guy out there, a young man, he was 18, which is important. He wasn't technically a kid, but he was 18. He went out there and he accumulated enough Pepsi points for the jet, and he demanded the jet. And Pepsi refused to give it to him. They said they were just joking, and they kind of were dismissive. I think they offered him like 2 cases of Pepsi or something like that. He's like, I don't want 2 cases of Pepsi. I want a jet. And he ended up going to court, and it became a whole case. Have you heard about this ever?
No, I haven't heard about this. But I think it's funny. It's interesting. So first, how old was the kid?
I think he was 18.
18? Wow. Okay.
When this started, and this went on for a few years. I think he was 18 when this began, and went on into his 20s.
So did he get the jet?
No. So that was the whole case. It did go to court, and first there was a venue battle, and Pepsi actually outmaneuvered them initially because Pepsi beat them to the punch and filed suit in New York, where they knew that it would be more friendly to their argument. But the judge ended up ruling that no reasonable person would find that to be a serious offer. But see, what was interesting about it was that they were arguing that a serious offer to whom? They were saying that you have to bring in members of the Pepsi generation and children, because they said the commercial was clearly geared towards children. So it's one thing to say an adult wouldn't take it seriously, but would kids take it seriously? Which is funny. I mean, it's a funny argument. I don't think it's the best argument because, first of all, this guy was 18 himself, so he wasn't a kid. And second of all, if you're truly a kid, you can't enter into a contract anyway. I mean, your parents would have to step in and say, hey, that's a joke. You can't get the jet, right?
Yeah. I figured that's what you were going to say, that they're going to say there was no one would reasonably expect to receive a jet. But, they said it. And I mean, we just saw a lottery winning package of $1 billion. Like, who would reasonably expect that you could just win $1 billion from a lottery ticket?
I mean, I do. I reasonably expect that that's a real prize. Not that you have a good chance of winning it, but I wouldn't expect them to say, just kidding, you're not getting it. If they say that, that's the prize. And you win.
I don't know. I'd want my jet. Give me my damn jet.
Yeah. But it wasn't just any jet. It was a fighter jet. And then it became a whole controversy with the Pentagon getting involved and saying, well, civilians don't have this. And that kind of fed into the whole idea of no person should take this seriously because a civilian can't fly around in a fighter jet.
Right. Well, give me the money for the jet then.
Yeah. Well, that's what it was. They were going to try to flip it. And he actually, the guy found in the fine print that it wasn't just Pepsi points that you can get from the bottle caps. You could actually send it in an order form with money, and it had a certain monetary value. So I think it was like $700,000 that he ended up getting an investor to write a check for to buy the points, to buy the 7 million points for the jet. And they figured, well, that would be a good investment because they can buy a jet essentially for $700,000 and flip it for millions.
Now, see, that changes the game a little bit right there. Like, that means if he didn't just collect the points, like that's he's $700,000 into this. So
they wouldn't cash the check though. If they cashed the check, that would be a different story. They sent the check back and they said that this is not a serious offer.
Okay, so he collected the $7 million in another way then.
He didn't collect the $7 million. He sent in an order form saying, I would like the jet, and included a check for $700,000.
Oh, okay.
For the 7 million Pepsi points, because the catalog said that you could buy points as well. Like you send in an order form saying what you want, and you can just pay for the points to get the item.
Okay, so they wouldn't even let him buy the points.
Not for the jet. No, yeah, because you're not buying the points just generally. You're buying the points for an item that you specify on the order form. So he sends in the order form for a jet and the check for the points, and they send it back saying this is not a real offer.
Right.
But they did. So they were in negotiations, and actually at one point he got Michael Avenatti to be his lawyer. Obviously, this is way pre-Trump and all that kind of stuff. But in negotiations at one point, Pepsi offered to settle for $750,000, and were even, I guess, suggesting they'll push it up to $1 million. The guy turned down the $1 million to go to trial and lost. So he could have gotten $1 million out of it if he took the settlement.
I would have taken the $1 million.
Yeah.
Just because I realized, like, first of all, like I said, I wouldn't expect that I'm going to get a jet, but especially a fighter jet, a military fighter jet.
Yeah.
No, I would take that $1 million.
In retrospect, it was certainly the right choice, but he thought he was going to go all the way with this. I don't know, flip it for 30 million or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. I would have taken, and that would have been rough too. Like, just imagine if they're like, all right, well, here's a jet. Where do you want me to drop it off to?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because initially, before they realized they could buy the points, they were trying to come up with a whole scheme to even store the Pepsi. They're like, all right, we're going to buy like all the Pepsi in all the stores nationwide. We're going to have warehouses all over the country. We're going to hire people to cut out the labels or send the bottle cap, whatever they had to do to get the points. It was going to be a whole operation like that. And initially they determined that it wasn't worth it because there was too much overhead. But when they realized they could buy the points, they're like, oh, we'll just get a rich dude to invest in this and write a check for $700,000. Right.
So did the rich dude show up in the court case?
Oh yeah. He was in it. But he was just following what his boy wanted. I mean, the Netflix special tells you the whole story of how they met. It was like, I think they were mountain climbers, but the rich dude was like much older than the kid, obviously. But I think he was like a, I don't know what you call it. I mean, like a guide or something like that. Like the equivalent of like a counselor, like you have like a camp counselor, but I guess it's some kind of like guide who like takes you on these mountain excursions.
Oh, okay.
So that's how they met, and they were climbing mountains together and struck up a friendship. And the investor was like, hey, listen, whatever the kid wants to do, I got his back.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the radio joke where they get people and they're like, okay, we're gonna do this giveaway, do this and this, and you get a Toyota. And then the woman, I think, won or whatnot, and so she shows up to get a Toyota, and they give her a toy Yoda.
Right. I heard about that as well.
Yeah, it's like, wait, what's going on? Hey, we said Toyota,
but that was only said verbally, right? It wasn't
right.
It was like, if it's written down, is there a space between it, or is it Toyota?
Or and it's spelled differently, but it was verbally said. But it's just verbally. Like a kind of a, I don't know. It's not.
That's a better case, though. I mean, to me, you go back to that question: how would a reasonable person interpret that? I think the reasonable person would think they were giving away a Toyota. No, it's Toyota. Who thinks that?
Yeah, that's funny.
But there was another part of the case which wasn't in the Netflix special, I guess, because it wasn't as interesting. But the case was also decided on the idea that for a contract of that value, it had to be in writing, something called the statute of frauds, and applies for real estate transactions, but also for very large financial transactions. And so there was no writing here, because normally a contract is just an agreement between people. It doesn't have to be writing. Like, people think that a contract is just a piece of paper, but it's not. It's the agreement. The paper can be used to memorialize that agreement, right? Like to evidence the agreement, but the paper itself is not the contract. But in a case of real estate transactions or very large financial transactions, oftentimes, depending on state law, you do have to have a writing of it. And there wasn't in this case. And so that was another reason why they couldn't win.
Yeah. And because this would not be a small transaction.
Right.
Crazy amount.
But here's something that's interesting. Before we move on from that Pepsi jet topic, there was a lawsuit recently where this might have come into play. And it was when Bill Maher did a segment on his show, actually, about Trump. And he said that he believed Trump was a descendant of some kind of primate. I don't know if it's an orangutan or an ape. I forget what exactly it was. But he was joking on his show that if Trump could produce his birth certificate to prove that he wasn't the offspring of a primate, that he would give him $1 million. And I guess it was a play on the whole birtherism with the Obama birth certificate thing, but it was a joke on his show. Trump actually sued Bill Maher in court with a copy of his birth certificate demanding the $1 million. I would guess, I would bet money that they cited that case as precedent to say that no reasonable person would consider that to be a real offer.
I wonder what the result of that was.
It got thrown out.
It did? I mean,
yeah.
Listen.
It was a joke. It was a clear joke.
Listen, I could understand calling his bluff. Like, hey, all right, here's my birth certificate. Where's my money?
Right.
I can totally see.
But here's a clear difference. Bill Maher is a comedian, and that was a comedy show. Even though it's about the news and that kind of thing, it's still a comedy show. It was for the laughs. The Pepsi commercial wasn't supposed to be comedy. I mean, they were saying that part of it was a joke, but it's not like these are Pepsi comedians, right? Like, it was on its face, you can make the argument that it was real, because they were saying, 20 points for a t-shirt, and like the other things in it were real. Then that last piece, they said it wasn't serious, but it wasn't like the whole thing was just a ha-ha joke.
Right. Yeah. I don't remember it being a case. I think I remember the commercial though.
Yeah, and then once all this started happening, they modified the commercials, and then they did put fine print underneath. I think one said "haha, just kidding," and then they started upping the point value to make it impossible, or make it like even if you bought the point, you would lose money on it, like 7 billion points and that kind of thing.
Right.
The guy I think it was pretty well done. They actually went to the guy who made the commercial, and he said that initially, I think it was a higher amount, but the Pepsi executive said he couldn't read the number. It was too big of a number. He's like, make it a small number. And so they made it a small number just for readability, just for the presentation of the commercial. And it cost them really, because this guy ended up taking them to court and everything over it. But the guy was really adamant. The guy who was trying to get this jet really believed that it was a serious offer. He wasn't like thinking that this was a joke and he was going to try to get one over on them. He really thought that they were offering the jet. And he said he thought millions of his peers thought the same. And he thought it was a race against everyone else to get that jet first.
Right.
And I can see, I guess if you're a kid, you might think that way. Now I would never think that, but maybe as a kid, I would have thought the same thing, because, we're more naive. If you see something on TV, it looks real to us.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. That's funny. But he didn't end up getting it, and he didn't get any money, so that sucks.
No. Maybe now he's compensated because he's on Netflix on a very popular show or docuseries. I'm sure he's paid handsomely for this.
Yeah, you would think. Well, would they have to? I mean, was he interviewed in the show?
Oh yeah, the whole thing was about him. Like, he was telling the story basically.
Oh, okay.
But there was a lot of people involved. There was Pepsi executives, people who made the commercial. They interviewed lawyer Michael Lavinati, like everyone associated with this.
All right. Dude, where's my jet? I might have to.
You should check it out. Yeah, actually, it was more fascinating as a Netflix show than as a case in contract law.
Yeah, I think what might be funny to me is just seeing his listening to him talk as far as believing that he was going to be able to get this jet.
Yeah.
That might be what
the different schemes. If you ever saw Seinfeld, it was like when Kramer and Newman went and got the bottle caps. They tried to drive them to Michigan because you get more money in Michigan to return the bottles. So they're like, let's get all these bottles from New York and bring them to Michigan. Right. That might have been inspired by this actual story, because this guy says that's basically what they were doing, but on like a nationwide scale at first. So like, all right, how can we get the warehouse space and where we store all these bottles and hire the people to do it and everything? Like, he was really trying to run an operation to get these points.
Wow. That's funny.
Yeah.
What would you do with a jet? Just curious. If you had a jet, it showed up, what would you even do?
Yeah, they were talking about giving people tours, and then like I think only like one person can sit in it. It's not like an actual jet with passengers. It's a military vehicle.
Yeah. So it's a fighter jet.
Yeah.
In the commercial, it's a Harrier.
The Harrier, yes.
Jump Jet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. Yeah, I think there's only one. And I don't know if there's like a co-pilot.
I don't think so. I think it flies kind of like a helicopter too, so you don't have to go like on the runway and get the speed like you said, like a hover. So it just like kind of like takes off from a standstill.
Yeah, the Harriers can take off vertically.
Yeah. So definitely a cool jet, but
yeah,
not really suitable for civilians. They did say, I guess it would be legal if you took all the weapons and technology, all the military grade technology from it, but
right to bear arms, man.
Yeah, right.